when this started to happen, and I stopped, all the things that made me feel empowered and made me feel and have control over the direction of my life, when those just baseline capacities started to fail me and I stopped having that control, what it felt like was that I was in space and my carefully constructed spaceship kind of just came apart.
So what do you think it means to be a good man? What I guess let's start with mental health and a couple thoughts from you on why it's important to you, both like to you personally, and then secondary, like important to talk about and to share, like why are we even having this conversation?
Yeah, I do think obviously mental health is important. Um, I was it flashed into my mind that great line from The Departed, which comes from I grew up in this Irish Catholic enclave near Boston, and it's that what Freud said that the Irish are the only people that can't be psychoanalyzed. Um, yeah, I mean, I definitely didn't grow up in a place with therapeutic language. I wouldn't say it was necessarily backward in any strict way, but there wasn't necessarily this idea that through conversation, particularly with a trained stranger, that you could um, gain some perspective on your life and some internal insight that you might not otherwise get in the swim of things. I think the energy was more stop there's an element of narcissism to that or self-indulgence, and you're better off just mowing the lawn and getting things done and doing things in the community and just don't think so much about yourself. um, Maybe there's a kernel of truth there because maybe there is a balance that needs to be struck, but obviously for a long time men weren't encouraged to go to therapy. It wasn't really part of the culture, and so I think it can be helpful to take some time. And I think what's initially what um because I do go to therapy often in context of dealing with my physical health, but what prevented me for many years starting that process was this idea of talking to a stranger. Um, it felt um, not threatening, but um, just like, maybe it's a New England thing. It's like we don't want to burden other people with our kind of internal stuff. Can you really trust a stranger? It seems strange. It just it seemed like an odd step. And what I didn't understand was that sometimes speaking to a stranger who will not no longer become a stranger after a few sessions, but speaking to someone who's completely outside your daily life
Mhm.
and doesn't have a stake in um, who's right or wrong and whatever conflict you're bringing or talking about is hugely helpful. That objectivity, that because um, I think it can be difficult to see ourselves from above. Obviously, it can be hard to spot problems because we're so solutions to problems because we're so embedded. So actually, it's the very thing that kept me away from therapy that I find most useful. This person doesn't get emotionally involved. I can bring emotions or things that I don't want to upset people with because of the way I'm feeling. Uh, I can bring it to this person. It's not going to ruin their day. They're equipped to take that on board, discuss it, deal with it, and they can move on healthily. So I don't know. I think it's if someone has access to it, I would definitely recommend it. Um, I would definitely. I don't know. I don't know why I feel compelled to say this, but maybe it's from my own experience. If it's somebody who you feel like you're just going down the same emotional venting over and over and over again, maybe find somebody else because I do think it's important to have some kind of directionality or some kind of action you can take, that there's some kind of that you're getting something positive out of it. It's not like okay, I haven't turned my life around in 6 months, so I got to fire this this therapist. Nothing like that. But you don't want it to become too circular and
Hmm.
something that where you just go over and over and over things. I think that's not super helpful either. Um, and I have run into that before, and maybe
Hmm.
that's because the person um, maybe isn't engaging as much with what you need, and they're just being a sounding board without giving you anything back. I'm not quite a fan of that type of therapy. I think you sort of do want some kind of practical advice sometimes, or something to move the needle. Um, so, anyways, not that anybody has asked necessarily for my advice, but if you're trying to look for somebody, I think see if that person is really helping you, even if your internal monologue starts to change, and if some of your actions start to change. I think that's a
Hmm.
sign that the process is working. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great like multifaceted take on talk therapy. The initial apprehension, this is a stranger, I'm talking deeply about my life to a new person. That's like scary activation energy in taking the first step that I think tons of people could relate to. And then the flip side, once you're in it, when you realize that this is like a carve out vessel, completely third party, independent from your life, and they don't care about the inner social emotional workings of your life that are super raw and reactive to the client because like you said they're above and objective and but also pressure testing like um both that like you need the right fit with a therapist who's engaged and with a direction and like the two-way street of you have to be intentional and pushing that because in my own therapy journey too I have um, had stretches where things feel really productive and I'm either uncovering things or changing the way I feel about things and then sometimes it's if I don't kind of sometimes it takes some pre-planning like okay in this session I'm going to talk about this and like or go back into that memory to feel how I felt during that and if I don't do that it can be either like a complaining session or like a pat myself in the back session which has a time and a place but like you said if it's 6 months of a echo chamber of just like a chit chat venting then you it could be your own pressure testing for like what you need with therapy. Yeah, if you need companionship and a venting chamber, great. If you want like these are the three things I want to change in my life with therapy, then it maybe not is the best fit. So yeah, I think it's a super like valid and like important read on talk therapy for people engaging with it. Like those are good variables to think through.
Yeah, and one last thing on this topic, because and this is just a therapy veteran, I guess, but I feel if somebody's thinking about it, is if you do find that there's some element that you're not quite satisfied, you can bring that to the therapist. That's the other benefit of, like I was talking about, that objectivity, that carve out sense. You can go to a therapy session and say, you know what, I'm not sure the last session didn't go great, or I'm not sure we're moving in the right direction. These are things you can't always do in your regular life with people. You can't say to your friend, I'm kind of sick of this dynamic, like it's a little harder to have those very direct conversations. But usually therapists should be and will be super responsive, and at least you can give it a shot. If something's not working, you can try to address it and change tactics. They'll usually work with you. Um, and so that's another thing, is it um, because of the boundaries that therapy puts in place, it actually frees you up in a way to be way more direct than you necessarily are in your regular life.
Yeah.
At least for me, I'm kind of conflict averse naturally. So it's something that I feel like therapy's helped me with, because it's
Mhm.
like this place where you can say, you know what, I I don't know if this is really working, can we rethink this
Mhm.
in a really direct way. So yeah,
Yeah,
I
I
think I think it can be good practice for that and good training.
Yeah, I could totally relate to that. Conflict is hard, and I think structure makes it easier. Talk therapy kind of has its own built-in structure, but I've experienced with friends and relationship like adding structure to like, hey, let's have a conversation like before you have it. So it's like, all right, we're gonna be talking about something that's not like just catching up.
Yeah.
Has been helpful to like preset the stage for the conflict or a deep conversation. Has been really helpful for me. Um, I'm curious. So we've been focusing on talk therapy. How you landed on that pathway is like this is going to be a good path to walk to make progress on the things I want to make progress on. Part of like the work and the conversations. There's so many different avenues that are out there for improving your mental and physical health. So I'm curious if you've explored any others or thought about any others, or like was there a decision in choosing the path of going with talk therapy?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I've tried many, many things. I mean, the story of my life is essentially this. I had a very intense plan for my life, pursued it really relentlessly from a young age, um, and then developed very gradually, but more and more health problems in my early adulthood into my now kind of middle age adulthood. Um, and they totally derailed that life plan. And uh, so it presented not only a kind of, okay, how do I get through this day in which I'm feeling incredible physical pain or I'm facing this next surgery or whatever treatment or whatever's happening, the kind of chaos and uncertainty and all the stress of that. But then also, how do I live now? How do I grieve this life that I can't live? Um, what what's a life that I can make within these ever closing constraints that's still meaningful and worthwhile? Um, a lot of what happened is as my kind of physical body became less and less capable of doing things. I can't exercise. I can't do yoga. There's so much I can't do, but I can still think and I can still talk. So talk therapy was one of the things that's left, in a way. But also, I think there's probably something. So part of becoming very ill in a way that immobilizes you, um, you become physically isolated. So becomes a huge premium on relationality and talking to people because as introverted as a person can be, um, there's still some need for some kind of social connection.
Mhm.
And so anyways, for all those reasons, it felt like this could be a huge adjunct, or a really necessary intervention. I have found that there are limits, but these are human limits because when you talk to therapists, even I've made a concerted effort in the last several years as I've kind of been more confronting, um, like extreme, life changes and mortality, that this required like a huge, metanoia, they would call it, like a change of mind, a change of approach to the world, change of relationship to the world and to myself. And naturally, you want some kind of, or I wanted some kind of guru to help me make this change because, um, there's just a big part of me that doesn't want to accept this. And uh, how can I do that? I felt like I was looking for someone who could help me, and I have to say, I didn't find it. And what I've come to realize, I think, is that what I had in mind was something from the movies. Like I was in my mind, I'm like, okay, this is the part in the movie when Yoda shows up or somebody there's some kind of mentor, elder figure who is going to come in and give me these answers and help me get through um, this existential crisis, get on the other side of this. Um, and the people that I've turned to, which have included therapy, different types of therapists, even therapists that specialize in kind of medical, chronic medical conditions, um, uh, they don't have those answers. I can't help but feel sometimes that these are lovely people who are saying all the best things that they can think to say, but they themselves aren't in this situation, nor have they ever been in it. And so, and even if they had, what true, I can't imagine what they can say that can make this okay. It's not okay. It's not going to be okay. Um, and so what I've the turn I've had to make is that okay, because it was like, why aren't I finding this answer through myself, through other people? Why aren't I finding um, this magical change in perspective that's going to make me okay with what's happened? Um, and where I've arrived at is maybe there isn't a magical perspective. Maybe these people I've sought out, even these very trained therapists, don't have the key words because there are no keywords, because they're just human beings and I'm just a human being. And there isn't an answer that would satisfy that. And the only thing that could be done is to live through the uncertainty,
Hmm.
live through the horrible mystery of why, um, and to what they say, live the question, instead of constantly pursuing an answer. Um, and that's that's not an easy thing to do for some people. Some people are incredible at that. Um, it's not easy. It hasn't been easy for me. I won't pretend like I've made that fully transition that I'm talking about, that I've metabolized this. I've come out the other side. No, I'm still in it, and some days are still incredibly difficult, and still can find myself getting caught in fix it mode, or that there has to be a way for me to fix this narrative. I'm supposed to be in this type of story. I don't want to be in this other type of story. Um, we don't always get to change our stories or pick our stories. Um, so, um, yeah, what does therapy become when um, you initially started as a way to improve your life, and then you find out that maybe your life is not going to improve? Then that's out of your hands. um, what does it become then? And that's what I'm trying to figure out. I still think there can be value there, even if it's just, as you said, companionship as you kind of walk through um, kind of misery, to be honest. And that can be invaluable, you know. So I don't know if I've talked you out of a career in therapy. It's becoming some
Not at
kind of
all.
therapist because, but they're human beings too, and this is probably the most obviously human sided part of the medical field. And I think there needs to be a respect not only for these boundaries that we're talking about, but a respect for what's possible for one human being to give to another human being, and
Hmm.
vice versa. And sometimes it's just presence,
Hmm.
Um, I know I'm maybe contradicting myself a little bit from what I said earlier about not getting into this echo chamber, but also there's just a realism about where you're at, and sometimes your journey changes. And so I'm in a bit of a different stage at this point, looking for different things, finding out what the limits are to what can be fixed and what can't be, trying to
Hmm.
figure out um, what I can do in this little box that I'm in. Um, but I've talked too much.
Well, you phrased it beautifully in a way that like I can feel and understand, um, which is a testament to the words, right? To communicate something incredibly complicated, difficult, personal. Um, in a way that someone can really relate. So I think you communicate your feelings and situation very effectively in a way that I can feel. And then also I think the human knee-jerk reaction to find an answer to ease suffering is so strong. And even as you were saying, like I was looking for the answers and I couldn't find it in the therapist, like I was waiting for them, like, oh, like Will must have figured it out after, like I'm waiting to hear it because it's such a human reaction to like want to have that knowledge and that power to like um ease the suffering and find that key that's external and it's like a hunt and a pursuit for the fix. um
Yeah.
and that is less about the actual fix or the key, but like the frame of mind and like looking for that, as you were saying, which I think is a really important distinction. um, because then it becomes about like what does life look like in the absence of that like drive to fix it, and you're left with, like you said, figuring it out within the story that has kind of been built around you, that's not your choosing. I
Yeah.
also think there's so much overestimation when it comes to agency in terms of like what our lives are so centered. I think it's especially like young adulthood are so centered on self and like you and where you fit in your life narrative and the people around you. And it makes, not can make, it makes things affecting you even bigger because you are the totality of your entire experience and universe. Um, I wonder, have you felt like a decentering or like a greater connection to others, like as your story has shifted so much over the years?
Yeah, I definitely felt like I had I almost felt like I was when this happened, when this started to happen, and I stopped, all the things that made me feel empowered and made me feel and have control over the direction of my life. When those just baseline capacities started to fail me and I stopped having that control, what it felt like was that I was in space and my carefully constructed spaceship kind of just came apart. And I was suddenly, in this, you know, sub-zero, no oxygen. I mean, it was like, how do I even live in this environment without this protective thing that I built throughout my childhood, teenage years, young adulthood? We build these identities and, whatever. Um, and it was incredibly painful, exposing the vulnerability, the idea of being dependent again in a almost childlike way. Um, all of these things uh, were incredibly distressing. They did also crack me open to a different type of emotional register, a different level of empathy for other people, different type of relationship. I think it changed my writing in a positive way. Um, uh, Despite it becoming harder and harder to like physically do a lot of the things that would feed my writing, including reading. Um, Sometimes I look back and I think, if this hadn't happened, would I even have really had anything to say,
Mm,
as a writer? Because I think I had skill with words, which came from loving to read and write my whole life. But that's a lot different than having a story to tell. Um, and if you're incredibly self-protected, I think you're probably limited in some ways as a writer. Um, I don't think it's coincidence that a lot of the great writers, uh, Hemingway is the poster child for this, but there's a lot of other examples, but who would drink before writing is a way to lower those inhibitions. If you're super self-protected, it's actually harder, I think, to get that to that emotional, raw state that feeds what we think of as great writing. Um, but um, I guess what I want to say as well is that I don't think that it's unnatural that we create those, what I refer to as a spaceship, that we create those identities. I think that's part of growing up. Um, Ideally, you would like that spaceship to carry you further into life, before it starts to, and you would hopefully want a kind of controlled demolition of that as you get older and where you have supports in place, maybe, because I think it's a very second half of life type of process where you have career stability, you have a spouse and a family, you have, maybe you have a house, maybe you have responsibilities, you sort of have your stuff together, and then maybe you start to feel a kind of maybe some type of void or emptiness or something happens that throws you off, and you need to now go on this journey to explore who you are without all this armor you've built. It's a little harder when that happens when you're like 22, because uh, I didn't have any, I felt like I hadn't created an adult life yet for myself. I was still really a student and an intense student, still trying to build. Um, and I don't think I had the emotional maturity. I certainly didn't have the interpersonal type of maturity to rely on to know how to reach out for help from other people. So this was not a pretty process. I didn't, I did not, this was not gracefully done. I've spent a long time fighting, and in denial and not accepting things in a way that was probably unhealthy and unhelpful. Because when I look back, I think, well, I don't regret trying to get better, um, or trying to put my life back together. It's only natural. Um, but did I have to, if I could go back, I wouldn't necessarily have thought as I did through much of my 20s and even much of my 30s. Well, this thing is happening that's not supposed to happen. So I'm going to hit pause on my life, fix this. And
Mm.
then once it's fixed, I'll get back to living. That was a mistake because now I realize and I've learned, and as things have progressed and I've gotten more clarity on what's happening, that this is only going to get probably worse. Every day is I'm probably at my best, that I'm going to be at. And so it was I wasted a lot of time, I think, that could have been um, used to better effect, to savor life in whatever way that I could. Um, Again, it's an argument now for me to seize on that hard-won self-knowledge to take, for example, today to savor life in a way that I can. It's hard. It's hard when you don't feel well. It's hard when uh, it's difficult. There are people out there who are so much better than me at this, um, and uh, I feel like a very poor example, for anybody, and a poor practitioner of my own advice that I'm giving right now. But that doesn't stop it from being good advice or what I think, it's what I think is true. So
Mhm.
I can always, I feel like I need to do better, but
Well, I think it's there's the intention and the drive to be better in that pursuit, and that pursuit is always worthwhile no matter what, because we're all in pursuit of that. And I think consciously savoring life in any circumstance is both rare and like harder than it should be, and is at the same time I think something you can practice, um and it's never enough because we can't really conceptualize the value of our own life, except on a relative scale, which isn't helpful, right?
Right.
Like this day was better than that day, and I feel better in this era than that era, but like what does that matter? Right? So I I think it's a ever worthwhile pursuit that you can practice is rare and difficult, and is never enough.
Yes. Yeah, and uh, the part of me that fights, the part of me that has drive, the part of me that does want to fix it, I don't want that to completely go away. That is partly who I am. I can maybe choose how I direct that better. So I'm never going to be a Buddhist on the top of a mountain. It's just not in me. I will always, till I die, I think, have a certain attachments and desires, but I think there's a balance between that and I mean, this is the goal. This is my goal right now. Balancing that, not giving up that sense of identity, trying to still make a meaningful, what feels like a meaningful life to me, and connects to who I am and who I always have been, so that I'm not completely abandoning myself and my ego in some way, that I'm now nobody or some, pure vessel of light or something. I still want to be me, still me, but balancing that with uh, gratitude, with this idea of trying to savor as much as possible life, trying to be conscious of, um, okay, well, you know, I'm not in the hospital today. I'm at home. That's a huge victory. Because I know every time I'm in the hospital, I think every day I'm not in this place is a gift. I'm never gonna complain again when I'm out of this place. And then of course you go home from the hospital, you get into your routine and you're complaining about whatever. So I think if I can find some balance between still being myself, um, and also trying to bring in what feels a bit foreign and new to me, but this type of gratitude and this kind of bigger awareness and this phrase radical acceptance. Um, I wish I could take, I wish it came in pill form. Just take it. It's really hard for me. It's really challenging, but that's, that's, I think that's my, I think that's where I'm aiming right now, is to find some kind of functioning chimera of those two ways of being. Um, and well, I don't know. I hope this is making sense.
It's totally it's crystal clear, and I think it's I caught like a flash of Boston grit like in the face of the Buddha like fuck that, I'm not gonna
Yeah,
celestial being, I am who I am.
yeah,
I think that balance makes sense. So it's like the two different ends of the spectrum. Um, in terms of your writing, um, what does that process look like? And then I also want to like get into how we can share that as well in however form we can do that because I think uh, that's very worthwhile.
yeah. Thank you. So my writing has been um, changed from the way I envisioned it. Obviously, growing up, I was like, I'm gonna write the great American novel. Um, and what I found is that what my capacity allows me to do is to write in these short sprints. I can't really do marathons. My health doesn't sort of allow it. And so I've tried to find forms and develop kind of literary forms that fit my limitations, but that actually I've found also can highlight some of my strengths or could become strengths. Sometimes our limitations and our constraints creatively can lead to these sort of breakthroughs. And I don't write the most commercial work, I would say, that if I was sitting down and just writing these these novels that I could market. Um, Instead, what I'm writing typically short, very short lyric essays um, that start with something usually immediate in my day or my environment, and then kind of go on a little bit of a journey and end somewhere new and different than, I have no idea when I start where I'm going to end. Um, it's, I think of them as walkabouts. Uh, there's literary precedent for this. With the Romantics, they had what they called conversation poems, very much like this. It was both because of the style. It was like Coleridge, he's taking a hike with his friends. He gets tired. They go ahead. So he hangs out with this lime tree and he writes this long poem about his lime tree bower and just that he's sitting there. But then he, starts to have thoughts and he can bring in and talk about philosophy or whatever and then sort of come back. And it's all done in a conversational tone. So I didn't consciously draw on that inspiration, but when I look back, I'm like, okay, this is legal precedent for me to be able to do this as a writer. Um, the benefit to it is that it's very direct. Um, it's easily digestible in a way for our kind of attention span, and people read on their phones. So it could be sent, either if they're reading in a book, they come in small chunks, or it could come as an email newsletter, and it's something that can be read in those interstitial moments that we now have, like waiting in line at CVS or something like that. So it feels like it's a form for the time in a way. Um, Again, not intentional, but I'm making a case for it. And uh, to bring back this theme of acceptance, um, it doesn't have the monumentality that we associate with great Mount Rushmore writers, which
Hmm.
is you can't help but set up as models if you are some kind of kid growing up with literary ambition. I mean, my hero was like James Joyce. So, where's my, 1200 page Finnegan's Wake? Instead, I'm writing, these 2 page, sort of almost what feels like letters to the reader in a very direct, intimate way about something that goes from the mundane to maybe, the cosmic in some ways, but is very firmly rooted in our daily life. Um, I don't think I'm going to get a statue in the middle of Dublin, or in my case, Boston, writing in this way. However, these sort of paper airplanes that I'm throwing out my window to be picked up and read, um, in a way, I found that they can have a surprising ability to pierce, as frivolous or small as they seem, um, because of their nature and because of how fragmented our attentions are and how isolated we are despite the noisy, crowded digital environments we're in, that
Hmm.
something short and heartfelt and uh, unadorned and told in a direct manner can actually it has a it has the quality of like a pebble, you know, uh, going off your window at night, that's going to wake you up even more than, some kind of news bulletin in a way because of its nature. So I don't know. I feel like I found a way to connect, which was always the goal with writing, in a way that's smaller. Um, I don't think I'm going to win the Nobel Prize. Not that I was ever going to win the Nobel Prize, but I don't, yeah, I don't, it's not a billboard.
Hmm.
These are very small kind of missives, but I think there's a place for them. It's what I can do, and it still has meaning. So
Hmm.
maybe it's a demonstration of what I'm kind of been talking about earlier, um, but not trying to control our life, but letting our life lead us to places that are unexpected, and who knows what can come from that. So
Hmm.
now that I've made such a pitch, people I hope will go check it out and not be too disappointed. Um, my current project, which I've been doing for the last 5 years, is a newsletter called The Lunar Dispatch. It's on Substack now. I started pre-Substack Um, Substack is a newsletter service, if anybody knows. Um, if anybody doesn't know that, um, you can sign up on my Substack page or on my website, which is willdowd.net. And what it is every full moon, I send out an email, a letter, um, talking about the moon and whatever else has come up or I'm thinking of. It's very improvisational. Um, but what I've found is that a lot of people enjoy it and it's a good way to connect because one of the benefits is it makes me um, pay attention to the lunar cycles and not miss these full moons. You never know how many full moons you're going to get in your life, and it's at the very least, it's a little notification to stop and look up because time passes so quickly and we are all looking down so much and looking at our screens. And so to have a moment to remind us to look up at the sky and to connect over that. I have a lot of surprising number of subscribers at this point. I think for that very reason is people want those moments and they want to connect over it. Um, it's kind of become something beautiful. I have to say, if you look at the last few full moons, there was a little bit of a gap because I've been, um, I mean, I'm pretty all weather. I'll write even when I'm not feeling well, but there's been a few gaps recently, just out of my hands. But before that, I've been pretty consistent for 5 years. I plan to stay consistent and just see where it goes. But um, it's really nice for me because it marks time. I don't know about you, but certainly I feel like the way we live, and then as we get older, time just starts to spin faster
Mhm.
and faster. It is like some crazed malfunctioning carnival ride. And you just think, this can't be right. This cannot be the way time moved before. It just
Mhm.
seems to fly. So this does help me mark out time and again, uh, not forget to savor life as we have it, as it flies past. So
I love that, and I can't think of the last time I encountered something that was based off the lunar cycles as a schedule, so that rocks.
yeah, it is kind of cool. It's such a different pace, it's such a different way of looking, and it's so ancient. I mean, we find these lunar clocks, these timepieces carved out from, Neolithic period. So that was our way of telling time as a species for so long.
Mhm.
So in a way, it's getting very back into the tap roots of who we
Mhm.
are. So there's something uh, kind of fun about that. And at the same time, that's what I love about the moon. It's so ancient and it's so futuristic. There's so much happening now with developing the moon, plans to colonize the moon, space travel. So it's this great nexus point for the future, the past, and most crucially, this present moment. So that's my pitch for the moon as a subject. It's also I've got such a perverse thing. I was like, everything's been written about the moon. What is left to say? I mean, every poet has taken a swing at it. It's like a piñata. Is there any candy left in there? But that felt like a fun challenge. So I have a good time every month trying to describe the moon in a different way.
I love it, and I'm excited to check it out. I'm excited to share it with as many people as we can on Under the Hood Talk. And I think this is one of those rare conversations that we actually can put the entire thing out there and it flows really well. And with, like I said, a testament to your words and how you capture things. Um, but in the coming, I don't know, week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, when we watch it back and share, we can be in touch with to make sure we're presenting uh, your work, your words in a way that makes sense for you as well. But I really appreciate the conversation and just getting to know you and meeting you is awesome. And I'm excited to check out your work as well. And just like the whole point of Under the Hood Talk is to capture a range of experiences and how those experiences interplay with men's mental health. And so I think um, your experience is very well worth capturing and sharing with people who can relate to it. And even if the circumstances might be different, the themes and the lessons are completely worthwhile and sharing to people in all different circumstances. So I really appreciate you sharing and capturing it in a way that is so clear to a listener who could just be passing by and doesn't have all the I don't know the biomarkers that would be like, oh, that's me, but
Yeah.
it can relate to the concept. So yeah,
That's awesome. I'm really gratified to hear that, and thank you so much. As I said, I had no idea what I was going to say, so but that's sort of how I write and how I talk. So, yeah, I appreciate that you're gonna run everything by me. I also feel like it was such a fun conversation. I don't, I have no problem with it going out. It felt so natural. I'm sure it'll be fine. But I wanted to mirror back to you that you just, I mean, from your other content that I listened to and then talking to you today, you have such a great presence, and you create such a special space, and I think you have a huge emotional intelligence. Um, and I rambled, and you let me. But so what I'm picking up comes a lot from also other things I've seen you in. I've seen you other interviews, but I just wanted to say that whatever you do in the future, um, I I think you found you're playing on your strengths for sure, and I think you can help a lot of people. And I mean, I don't really have a lot I can give to you, but if there's ever anything that I can help you with, I definitely believe in what you're doing and believe in you. If I ever become famous or write that great American novel, I'll shout you out in the
uh,
acknowledgments or something.
well, I appreciate the word, especially about creating the container. That's what's most important and what I take the
Yeah,
most seriously. So really appreciate that. And yeah, we're not going anywhere. We're gonna
great,
keep plugging along. This is what we do. And yeah, I would also love to stay in touch. Doesn't have to be the only conversation. So excited to check out your work, share, see what kind of reactions, comments, conversations come out of what we've talked about, which is also like a really great secondary ripple. Yeah, really great
great.
to make the connection.
Yeah.
And yeah, we'll be in touch.
Very cool. Have a good rest of your day, and
Excellent.
glad we made the connection.
Yeah. So,
Thanks.
what do you think it means to be a good man? What's